Welcome to Think Smart with TMFG, the weekly podcast covering the financial topics that are newsworthy and relevant to everyday Canadians. Hosted by Senior Financial Advisor Mike Connon of the McClellan Financial Group of CI Asante Wealth Management Limited, here is today's episode.
Welcome to Think Smart with TMFG. I'm Mike Connon. This is John Yaconetti, Financial Advisor with CI Asante Wealth Management Limited. John, a lot of people think the hardest part about retirement is saving enough money. But what we've seen is the real challenge really starts once you retire on that first year retirement.
Yeah. I mean, because really when you hit that first year, everything changes. You go from earning income to now relying on your portfolio. Even if they've done a good job saving, financially, things don't always feel as smooth as they may have expected.
No one really talks about the first year of retirement actually looks like. So in today's episode, we're going to walk everyone through that and let them know what to actually expect in your first year. What tends to happen financially in the first year of retirement and why it can feel different than people expect. So let's get into it. Many years ago, we have this thing called Client Advisory Board here, right?
Yep.
And we sit down and we have about 8 of our clients and we get feedback. And one time we just threw out this open discussion to them and we talked about retirement. And of that room, there was probably split. Half of them were retired and the other half were not retired. And the people who are not retired probably should be retired.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a coaching session for the people who weren't retired because there was this general fear. And we realized that the people that went into retirement had this extreme fear because they didn't understand what was going to happen. It's a very different thing because you get in this whole idea in life, you get used to spending your boss's money. Or your company's money, who it is. When you go, you buy things, you get a paycheck, and you go to the store and you spend the money you got in your paycheck. It was never really your money. When you save the money, it becomes your money. But until then, it's someone else's money. And there's this big transition where you've gone from getting a paycheck every week and spending it on groceries, trips, cars, things you like, all the stuff you enjoy in life, we have to go and change that over from spending someone else's money to using your money.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to get through.
As financial planners, we always kind of see the quantitative side of things. You know, we can tell when someone's able to retire based on our financial planning process, but there's really the qualitative factors of making that transition is, to your point, one of the hardest things for people. It's what are you going to do with your time? It's how am I going to make up the money to pay my expenses? It's exactly what you were mentioning before. And sometimes for people, it's just the concept of just getting paid from your employer and having one paycheck that you can rely on, to now having, maybe it's Canada Pension, maybe it's old age security, maybe it's your RRIFs, maybe it's an open account, and creating that income that you used to once have.
And they don't come in all at the same time either.
No.
It isn't like your paycheck. Usually everyone waits there every 2 weeks and they get their paycheck. It's Friday, it's payday, and they're out to go and spend that. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that. You're going to get your CPP and OAS at certain times of the month. It may line up with your expenses. So let's talk about that. Canada Pension Plan and old age security. Just to give people an idea, Canada Pension Plan right now, I last checked, it was about $1,364 a month if you have your maximum CPP at age 65. So it's a reasonable benefit. It helps out. You can take it earlier. If you take it early, it gets reduced 0.6% for each month earlier you take it. So that's, if you take it 5 years early, you could actually start at age 30 and it would be reduced by 36%. And if you take it later than 65, it goes up by 0.7%. So if you think you're going to live a long life, take it later.
It's a good idea.
You don't need the money. If you wait those 5 years and you take it 70, it's a 42% increase, plus the inflationary increase along the way too.
Exactly.
So it makes a big difference in there. Old age security right now is about $727 a month. And you can't take old age security before 65, so there's no choice in there. But if you do delay it, as some people don't need the income, that you can delay it up to 5 years. And again, you get a 0.6% or 30% increase over that 5 years to delay that. So that gives one source of income. What other source of income are there?
Well, then you start thinking about if you have a pension with your employer. So in some cases, for some people, defined benefit pension plan is becoming a pretty rare pension plan to have within Ontario. Think of a lot of government workers, hospital workers, maybe teachers, obviously have the defined benefit pension plan. But that's going to be a set degree of income from the day you retire to the day you pass away. In most cases, there's even a survivor benefit. So if you pass away, your spouse can get 50, 66%, something like that, of your pension. There's also defined contribution. So that is very similar to like an RRSP in a sense, where you're making a contribution in, your employer might be matching a portion, and you choose the investment. But when you're taking it out, same thing, it's all going to be taxed as income. And then you could also get into your own individual investments, the RSPs that you've been saving up for retirement. Now's the time you get to actually start utilizing them, as well as maybe an open account or potentially even a TFSA.
And one thing too, even with those good things to know, how your pension's indexed.
Yeah,
right?
that's absolutely huge.
There's different index in the pensions. I mean, if you're lucky and you have an old government pension, they're fully indexed with inflation. It's very unusual now. Even teachers' pensions have reduced indexing. Even I found some of the nurses' pensions have started to reduce indexing on them. So they're not as fully indexed as they used to be. Some have, I'll say, arbitrary indexing. I know some of the oil companies, they would every now and again just give people a bump up to give more pension, but it was never written down on paper, so you're never committed to anything. It is always a good idea to get to know how your pension is going to work over time. If we go back 2 years ago, people used to buy individual stocks, and they would pay quarterly dividends. So they would get paid out from their stocks, but it wasn't every month. It was once every 3 months.
Yep.
So very different type of cash flow. I know when I get my hydro bill, they're not going to wait 3 months to get paid.
No,
so they want to be paid every month. So sometimes these income, how they come into it, really goes and doesn't line up with where your expenses are. So you have to come up with a system. The good thing nowadays is investments are much more liquid than they were in the past. And they're very easy to make liquid without costs. Back many years ago, it was very difficult to take investments in stocks. There was a high cost of liquidating them to create income. So that's why these dividends were so important, because it would cost you a lot of money to get out of your, let's say, Bell stock. You didn't want to sell stock every time you needed. So they had a hefty dividend that would take care of your cash flows. But now portfolios are a lot more fluid, and it seems a lot easier to create these income plans. Nice part about the portfolio too is you can really adjust those income plans to line up with your expenses. So if your expenses come in the middle of the month, you can have a lot of the payments come in the middle of the month. If they're beginning of the month, you can separate out like that. We even have some people with payments that happen, they'll separate RRIF payments and open payments. So one comes every 2 weeks, the other one comes the next 2 weeks, just to give them a smooth cash flow.
You have a lot more flexibility when choosing your withdrawal decisions. And I think that's a tough thing for a lot of people to think about is there was no withdrawal decisions while you were working. You got paid either on the second Thursday of every month or whatever it was for the last 20 years. But now you have the choice in terms of how to structure that. And with that choice comes a lot of responsibility. Different sources of income are going to be taxed a little bit differently as well. So if we think about the pensions that you might receive or RSPs, RRIFs, things like that, those are all going to be taxed as income. Is it a wise decision for you to take it all early? It all depends on your own individual situation as well. So that's why we always recommend start thinking about, okay, what might be the best decision for me, not only to get to your final expense number that you need to pay at the end of the month or at the end of every year, but also to make sure that you're not owing too much to the CRA and losing a lot of it to the government.
Yeah, these are calculations that are more complex than you think. A lot of times, sometimes you want to get into your RRIFs early. We always hear this RRIF meltdown strategy.
Yeah.
This is a big piece that you talk about now. And the idea, if you have, let's say you don't have a good pension and you have a large RRIF, the problem is at age 71, you have to convert your RSP to a RRIF.
Yeah.
And at 72, you're going to have minimum withdrawals. A lot of times these minimum withdrawals will go and cause you to lose your old age security.
Yep.
And what you can do is in a situation before you're 72, you can start taking smaller amounts out of those RRIF accounts and make it so they don't grow as high. So you're not forced to lose your old age security at a later time in life. So this is stuff you really have to sit down with a planner to figure out where your situation is, because everyone has different amounts of income. Everyone has different pensions. Everyone has different amounts of income they're going to get from their open accounts. And some people have spouses so they can split income. Some people don't. So there's a lot of calculations to figure that out.
Yeah. And the old age security clawback, technically in itself is not a tax. But if you think of it this way, if you're beyond roughly around $92,000 worth of income, every additional dollar that you have to report as income takes away 15% of your old age security. So it's almost like adding an extra 15% tax on top of when you're in that range, probably around 30 to 35% marginal tax bracket. So it gets pretty costly.
I find a lot of mistakes that people do is they think very short term, right? Yeah. And they come up and they look down all their accounts and you say, okay, your RSP is going to create taxable income, but you can take out your open account and that one is I'm not going to say tax-free, but you're only paying tax on the capital gains that are inherent on that account. So it's generally very cheap to take out of your tax-free savings account. So sometimes people just try to save tax right now, and they replenish their open account. The one problem is when you go to buy big ticket items, that open account is wonderful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we have the situation with people who've got down to the point where they just have RSPs and they go, I want to buy a car. It's going to be $60,000 and just take it out of my RSP. I go, well, what about the tax? And they say, what do you mean about the tax? Well, to get $60,000 out of your RSP, you're probably going to have to take $80,000 or $90,000 to get that out of your RSP. And again, that's a big hit to where they thought their RSP would be. But when you have those open accounts, it's fantastic. You can take it out with relatively a small tax hit. But people also do their tax-free savings accounts. And that's another thing which people get a little bit confused about. They say, well, let me take all the money out of my tax-free savings account. Your tax-free savings account is the one piece of your portfolio that is going to grow tax-free for your entire life. It never makes sense to have less than the full amount you can have in that account if you have anything in a taxable account. It's one of those things where people want to get money out with because it doesn't cost them anything up front, but then you lose that tax shelter going forward. So you generally, if you take out your tax-free savings account, the next year you're going to go say, well, let's move the money from the open account to the tax-free savings account to get it back up to where it's allowed to be.
This is assuming everything is even within a good market. Now, I know a lot of concern that we have for our new retirees is taking money out of their investments if we end up going into a bad market. Yeah. And that's, you talk about a psychological game changer for people. They see how much is left within their accounts. They still have to withdraw the same amount to cover their expenses. And that could cause a lot of concern in terms of being able to withdraw money in order to pay your expenses once you do get into retirement.
I went to a seminar many years ago, and it was about the order of returns was the name of it. People can have the same returns on their portfolio over their lifetime and have a very different experience on how things are.
Yep.
And the problem happens is when people go into retirement and start to take out money, if they have poor returns in the early stages, the poor returns happen on a very large amount of money. And if you look at a 20-year period, you have all the poor returns at the front of it, and you're taking out money, and the good returns come at the end. There isn't as much money in the account to get the good returns on.
Yeah.
So if someone is in the, let's say, other situation where they start off and they have great returns to begin in, they've made so much in that beginning port, the lousy returns later on don't have as much an effect on the financial plan. So there is a big difference in order of returns. I mean, when we do our financial plans, we tend to go and test this to see what happens.
Yep.
We do a stress test where we do a 30% market correction year one. And again, we get to see what effect that happens on cash flows and the overall financial plan.
Other strategies that we could utilize too is having something that's a bit more stable within the portfolio if we know you're going to need to start drawing money out of it on a regular basis. So whether that be the fixed income portion of the portfolio, so kind of more like bonds that don't fluctuate as drastically as stocks would, or even having a cash wedge and having something just to provide a bit of security in there that if markets do take a tumble or they're down 10, 15%, you're not having to draw down the investments as dramatically. Maybe you can use something that's in a savings account, or maybe you could be a bit more strategic and withdraw from the fixed income while the equities are recovering.
Yeah. I always hear the cash wedge, but essentially the fixed income is higher paying cash wedge.
Absolutely.
You just have to make your adjustments to the portfolio. And, last time we had a big correction when COVID hit, 2020, we had many of our clients call in that were taking money out of the portfolio. And we made some adjustments. And we just said, let's take for this period of time, let's take out the fixed income. At that time, it only lasted a few months. And then we reversed back to where we had them before. But if we're in a situation where generally speaking, most people retire will have 30 to 40% in fixed income. So that's a big piece of their portfolio. That's a lot of withdrawals they can take out of that, allowing the market to recover.
Yeah.
And those are options that people ask, why do you have fixed income in a portfolio? Well, that's a big reason to have some fixed income in the portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway that people need to understand is the first year of retirement will never be perfect. There's never going to be that exact opportunity where it's going to be a smooth transition and you're not going to deal with any sort of market volatility. Yeah. And there's going to be something there that's going to cause a bit of concern. But at the end of the day, this is why we meet with people regularly to get them to and through this process because, markets work in cycles. I always tell our clients, at some point, you're probably going to have to go through 3 or 4 market downturns at least throughout your retirement. So you just got to weather the storm.
The first year is an interesting thing because what I always tell people is you have to find in your bank account what you're comfortable with. And everyone has different levels. Some people say, I need $5,000 in my account. Some people want 10. Some people want $50,000. Now, that's a comfort decision for people, right? Depending on what their expenses are and depending on what they need. But once they've made that decision in the first year, what I try to find is, let's say someone says $20,000 is my comfort level. I want $20,000 in my savings, let's say, /checkings account. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you create an expected inflows to match their outflows. Mm-hmm. So you say, whatever it is, I'm going to spend $5,000 a month. You make sure between the pensions, between the RRIF payments, between the SWIPs coming out of the open account or in deposits that we put in from the open account, everything should come up to be that, let's say, $5,000 a month. You start with that $20,000 balance, you check it every 3 or 4 months and see where it is. All of a sudden, if that $20,000 has started to move up to, or move down to, let's say, $15,000, okay, maybe $5,000 isn't enough. We can figure out your expenses now because we know what you're spending. And with that, we can make adjustments to that income plan to match up and ideally keep a level situation on those expenses. And a lot of times what people do is they just call us when they had the big ticket items. So your roof needs replacing. You need $15,000 or $20,000. So we do a redemption at that time to take care of that. But create an income plan from the portfolio that is going to cover your normal expenses.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned adjustments is going to be absolutely key. We're not going to create a financial plan first year retirement, and that'll be the exact same plan that you're working with 10 years later. Things are going to change. Life changes. It's just a matter of fact. But that's why we got to stay on top of it and make necessary adjustments at the end of the day to make sure that you're getting what you need to in order to cover your expenses, and you're doing so with the most tax efficient manner as possible. Remember, a lot of what happens in that first year, it's not permanent. It's not a perfect reflection of what the rest of your retirement's going to look like. So if things feel a bit off at the beginning, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It usually just means that you're figuring out how everything works now.
So if you want to learn more about how we help our clients in the first year of retirement, you can check out the show notes to book a meeting with us. You can reach out directly at 905-771-5200 or visit tmfg.ca. If there's something that you want us to talk about in a future episode, or if you have any questions about this episode, just leave a comment in the podcast website on Podbean. Thank you very much and have a great day.
You've been listening to Think Smart with TMFG with Mike Connon of the McClellan Financial Group of CI Asante Wealth Management. Don't forget to subscribe to Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube Music, and leave us a review. For more insights and resources, visit tmfg.ca or follow the link in the episode description. This program was prepared by Michael Connon, Senior Financial Advisor with CI Asante Wealth Management Limited. This is not an official program of CI Asante Wealth Management Limited, and the statements and opinions expressed during this podcast are not necessarily those of CI Asante Wealth Management Limited. CI Asante Wealth Management Limited is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund and the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization. This show is intended for general information only and may not apply to all listeners or investors. Please obtain professional financial advice by contacting us at 905-771-5200 or visit tmfg.ca to discuss your personal circumstances before acting on any information presented.